One of our intake of 6 new boys was desperately homesick, and after a week decided this was not for him, and he left of his own accord at 6 o'clock one morning. He was never seen here again. I wrote my first postcard home saying, "Great excitement this week. One of the new boys has escaped." Note the word boys in my description of Rendcomb. Boys, yes, it was all boys, a grand total of only 86, ranging in age from 11 to 18. There were no girls. One quickly learned either to get on with one's fellow students or how to avoid them. As for beneficial experiences, I've identified 3 areas in which Rendcomb gave me the sound help I acquired here. The first is acquiring knowledge of the important academic subjects. We were taught English, history, Latin, French, biology, mathematics, and physics. There are a lot of subjects missing from that list. I remember learning many things, such as, for example, a list of Latin prepositions taking the ablative case, which have never been of any further use to me. But things like the importance of reading the question, how to write a good essay, how to conduct an experiment and examine the results, have all been of great value. The logic of mathematics and physics, so skillfully presented by Lewis Hull and Jack Fell, stood me in great stead. So did that advice about read the paper carefully before answering the question, and also the ability to write clear, precise reports, thanks to Kathleen James. The second area is all the other information that one obtains, partly by direct teaching, and partly by the osmosis of conversation with others. And the two which I appreciate still most are music and art, both of which still give me very great pleasure. The third area, which I will call experience, which is a catch-all phrase for everything else, gave me the give and take of rough with the smooth, learning to live with a large group of other people in an all-male boarding environment, making good friends, some for life, many of whom I've met again today, following routines and timetables, playing sports.
To the OR Society. I'll now hand you over to Julia.
Thank you very much, Brian. Don't believe a word of it. He's taken my words away, but never mind. I came to Rendcomb as one of 6 new boys in September '46, as an 11-year-old, timid, shy child, excited and frightened at the same time by this huge mansion, a boys' boarding school. It was a school, first and foremost, with D.W. Lee Brown as headmaster, but this vast building was now also home. We were boarders. I was definitely homesick on my first night here and snivelled all night. And that provided the first lesson I learnt from Rendcomb. Always check, before you go to sleep, that you have a handkerchief, either in your top pocket or in your pyjama pocket. To Rome. The college is ideally placed in its Cotswold setting, and we were at liberty in those days to go where we pleased, provided we respected private property. For me, this was idyllic, and it gave me a lifelong love of exploration, hill walking, and travel. But as you already heard, I have a hidden 4th area, a special gift, if you like. One day when I was about 13 or 14, 3 girls were seen walking out of the college, across the asphalt, into the drive, up the church path, and away. Bear in mind, there were no girls in the school. This was unprecedented. I asked my neighbour who they were. He told me. The tallest one on the left was Hermione Lee Brown, the daughter of the headmaster, and the other 2 were the daughters of Mr. and Mrs. James, teachers of history and English. The one in the middle was called Helen, and the smaller one on the right was called Catherine. I thought. I like the one in the middle. To cut a long story short, I still do. Helen and I were married in St. Peter's Church here in Rendcomb in 1959, and she's sitting beside me at lunch today. I'm pleased to say that she tells me every day that in her eyes, I still look okay. I find this encouraging and quickly return the compliment. She, of course, lived in Rendcomb from birth until we were married, and so is as equally steeped in Rendcomb as I am, if not more so. This happy life together is actually the greatest gift Rendcomb has given me, even if it wasn't the original intention. By 1954, Rendcomb College had provided me with a solid base of general all-round education and a knowledge of how to live and thrive in a community of other people. I offer my sincere thanks to everyone involved in this process. I wouldn't wish for anything other, and I am quietly proud and extremely grateful to be an old Rendcombian. Quo lux ducit.
Thank you, Julian. Our second speaker is Stuart Shelswell. When I started at Rendcomb as a 10-year-old obnoxious little runt in 1965, Stuart was the head prefect at the time, so I'm rather sort of daunted by this. I look at Stuart with a sense of awe. How do I address him? Do I go, sir, or your Royal Highness? Or perhaps I fall on my knees and call him God. It's with a great pleasure I heard Stuart wanted to come to the reunion, so I don't think we've met since 1966 when he left. In the last few months I've had email correspondence with Stuart, and he generously shared photographs of his life and surroundings where he lives in the US. I also learned that Stuart has a second cousin, who's Robert Sherritt, who's here today. I don't think that was known until quite recently. Stuart is understandably very proud of what he's achieved academically. His name is displayed on the honours board in the front hallway.
Incorrectly.
Hang on. There are not many Rendcombians who achieve this. I understand from what Stuart has told me, he's a bit disgruntled by the fact that unfortunately his name's been spelled incorrectly. The board is missing one of the L's in his surname, Shelswell. Now, I've been quite troubled by this. I thought we ought to have to use this opportunity today while Stuart's here to put it right. I therefore brought along a tin of paint and a paintbrush so that Stuart can correct the spelling. I'll now hand you over to Stuart, who can tell us about his life and times here at Rendcomb back in the late 50s and early 60s.
Thank you, Brian. Can you hear me at the back over there? That side? Good. Actually, as a follow-on to that, my name should have appeared twice, because when I obtained my Master of Science degree at Cambridge, a few years later, I notified the OR magazine, and indeed it was printed in that. But my name never appeared on the honours board. And I suspect that when the signwriter was chastised for missing the L in the first time, and then told to put S.H. Shelswell, MSc, Control Engineering, St. Catherine's College, Cambridge, he probably said, I only have this much space, no way. And in fact, when I arrived this morning, early on, and introduced myself to Brian, we had never spoken before, he was a little concerned that my American Bostonian Gloucestershire accent would cause trouble with understanding my talk. So he suggested that I should have a short dialect, accent, and spelling test. I failed the accent and dialect test miserably. It contained difficult words like schedule, process, and tomato. No way. However, I did actually get full marks on the spelling, which included the word marmite, which is a substance that every American I know hates. It contained the word Vercingetorix, who I believe was an old friend of Bill White. I'm sorry Bill isn't here to confirm that. And it also had the word balustraded, which is a somewhat obscure and archaic punishment given to small Rencomian boys when they have committed some bad offence. I stand guilty. That happened to me. Anyway, on to what were the benefits of my education at Rendcomb. For the first 7 years, I relatively successfully, managed to assimilate knowledge and reproduce it. But when I reached upper sixth and had to start studying hard for university and to get good A-level grades, I realized that just knowing the subject wasn't good enough. It's not what you know, it's how you apply that knowledge. And I will ever be grateful for all the teachers at this school who impressed upon me at great patience and sympathy. And to a certain extent, a lot of hard work on my part. They conveyed that ability to me. This stood me in very good state at university and following research at Cambridge. And then in subsequent careers in computer programming, systems analysis, and eventually data analysis and big data. This is actually also applied since I retired about 9 years ago, over 9 years ago. I've been able to continue my efforts, Colin Burden would say, in woodwork, in carpentry, car maintenance, home maintenance, and sport. I grew here to love sporting activity, and I still try and play squash 2 or 3 times a week when I'm in the Boston area. To finish up, let me give you an example of this philosophy. In spite of all the name tags that you have, I've been having difficulty in associating names with faces. And actually I forgot what I was going to say. And I thought, what is the problem here? Remember, identify the problem, look at the possible solutions and implement them. The problem could be that it was my eyesight. This is possible. I have to wear reading glasses to do close work. It could also be my memory, because as Brian has said, it's 56 years since I saw any of you. But then the creative part kicked in. And I realized, in fact, the problem is you have all changed your hairstyle. And a few of you, well, maybe more than a few of you, have actually tinted your hair white in order to further confuse you. I would like to thank Brian for giving me the opportunity of explaining my Rendcomb education experience. I would also like to thank him for granting the entire nation the next 2 days as a holiday in honour of me coming back.
Thank you very much, Stuart. Our third speaker is David Tyler. David was here at Rendcomb from 1965 to 1970, and after university went on to have an extremely successful business career. One of the most high-profile positions that David held was as chairman of Sainsbury's. Of course, David also worked with many other companies, some rather more challenging than others. Now, I tend to shop at our local branch of Sainsbury's at Barnwood in Gloucester, and I can tell you that the staff on the tills are fed up with me badgering them for a discount. I explained to them that I was at the same school as their chairman, and shared a dormitory with the chairman's younger brother for 4 years, and he was a very good friend of mine, and therefore I ought to have a discount. Mr. Smith, please stop being so obnoxious and irritating. It's a trope I learned here, you know. You should be aware that we need to make as much profit as we possibly can to pay our exceptional chairman the salary he deserves. So it didn't work out as I planned. So on that note, I pass you over to Dave.
Well, thank you, Brian. And I've no idea that our staff were as well trained as that. My goodness. You only learn these things when you come to these unusual occasions. Now, can everybody hear me? Is it all right? Brilliant, good, that's great. So I'm going to start, not with a positive experience, but with a negative one, following my arrival here in April 1965 as a 12-year-old in the middle of a school year. So I was different arriving then, and my classmates reacted to that fact by nicknaming me the Runt and giving me a certain amount of grief during that first term. For example, I suffered the indignities of the bog flush. Now I wonder how many others here would be willing to admit that they too were given that treatment at some point in that early time here at Rendcomb. A particular form, I think, of Rendcomb's love and affection for its young boys when they arrived. Well, anyway, affected by that experience, as I got more senior in the school, I would never tolerate the occasional instances of bullying that I came across, and I still come down on it like a ton of bricks if I find it in the workplace. So that's Mark 1 to Rendcomb. Now, many of you will remember that the approach at Rendcomb was somewhat hair-shirtish. Dormitories with old metal-framed beds with horsehair stuffed thin mattresses, swimming in a cold pool even in the autumn term, playing sport on top, however wintry or torrid the conditions, doing PE or judo in that frozen gym over there. What was a gym then? No wonder my younger brother, who's here with me today, feels that his time here was the ideal preparation for his many years subsequently in the SAS. I learned early on here at Rendcomb the importance of contributing to the school and the local community, and not just of thinking of myself. We were obliged to do PW, we've had other people talk about that already, public work, and that obligation never changed as my life here continued to get more busy, particularly with academic pressures. I was doing anything from the washing up all weekend, and I'm still an expert washer-upper today, ask my wife, as a result, to weeding the gardens, a duty that I never took to. but my friend here, Alan Lamb, learned a lot from that, he told me the day, and is your gardener of need if you ever need one. Some of you will remember that one year our responsibility every week, come fair weather or foul, was to trudge up to top to clear stones by hand from a large field which was being converted into a games pitch. It was back-breaking work, and we of course weren't paid a penny for doing it. And I remember thinking, what a strange world it was. One in which my parents were paying fees to this school, which was then using me to do a manual labouring job for free. Something wrong there, but tough perhaps it was, but it has certainly taught me throughout my life to pay the greatest respect to any individual, however menial the job he or she was doing. So another score for rendcomb. I also learned a great deal from Rendcomb's system of self-government, the meeting, which you've heard about already. It taught me very early on to take an interest in how the community was being run, and also taught me how to speak in public. On the first occasion that I stood up at the meeting, in the room we were in before, as a 13-year-old, I remember I was incredibly nervous and failed hopelessly to get over my points coherently. The next speaker kindly said I was incomprehensible, and he was right. Hopefully, I've learnt a little about that one too. Indeed, as a result of that participation in the meeting, I started to learn how to influence decisions and how to bargain and negotiate, and indeed how to speak a bit. And all because of the far-sighted way that rendcomb was run. It certainly set me up for the future, and no doubt many others. And as a result of all this too, I had my first experience of the retail industry right here in Rendcomb. You'll remember that we boys used to run our own tuck shop here within this system of self-government, and someone had to volunteer to help run it, and so I put myself forward one term to do that, and I was voted in. So I learned to make sure that we had ordered enough Smarties or Mars bars or licorice all sorts, otherwise I'd have found myself deeply unpopular with the lovers of those particular sorts of sweets. On the other hand, we had to work to a strict budget and avoid stock write-offs, and so we had to learn not to over-order. So looking back on it now, I would never imagine then that this was the first bit of retail education for my future role at the country's second biggest retailer. So what can I say in summary? Standing back, I learned so much here. Clearly, it wasn't just the calculus, the Tudors and Stuarts, the laws of thermodynamics, though I benefited hugely from our inspirational teachers here who taught me about all of those topics. Nor was it only the team games, the theatrical performances, and the cross-country runs that I gained so much from. It wasn't just the fact that Rendcomb taught me how to put together an argument to be logical, though it did all of these things. No, it was because here I learned to look after the other person and how to do things for the common good. I learned how to make an independent judgment for myself about what was morally right and what was wrong. And I have no doubt that those values, which I learnt here in the Cotswolds in the late 1960s, have held me, and I'm sure many of you, in great stead over all the years since. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Our final speaker today is Hamish Wilson. Hamish hopefully won't mind me describing him as a youngster, because he's a lot younger than most of us here today. So he actually falls outside the 1970 cut-off point that we set for this event, because Hamish was here from 1971 to 78. But I made an exception for Hamish, and it was nothing to do with the £50 that he slipped to me. So Hamish is a very capable student at Rendcomb, I know that, and he's also contributed a lot to the OR Society in serving on the committee. He followed a career in teaching, which he'll tell you about, and amongst his other talents, Hamish is an extremely good poet. So I have given a little bit of license and asked him to give us a poem today at the end of his speech. I'll now pass you over to Hamish.
Thank you, Brian. Can you all hear me at the back? It's not too close, not too far away. Back there. So good. Speaking as an ex-teacher, I can safely say that one of the outstanding features of Rendcomb in the 1970s was the freedoms it offered its pupils. I can remember as an 11-year-old taking a packed lunch the first weekend I was at the school and walking to Chedworth with a new-made friend. This was both exhilarating and terrifying. Exhilarating to be let loose from adult supervision, and terrifying in the sense we mistimed the walk and we were worried we'd be late back for tea. We chanced our arm on a possible shortcut and just made it back in time for roll call. Being in the heart of the countryside was a joy, and it was a delight to be able to leave the confines of the classroom and walk straight out into open country. Nowadays, I'm sure such freedoms are rarely enjoyed due to health and safety constraints, but such freedoms were invaluable in allowing me to assess risk and take responsibility. The teaching at Rendcomb was excellent, and I'm sure inspired me to become a teacher myself. Lessons were well structured, but we weren't spoon-fed and allowed the freedom to make and learn from our mistakes, and encouraged to develop independent thought. I stayed on after A-levels to take the Oxbridge exams and had the privilege of individual lessons with David Sells. Preparation for the French literature paper gave me an invaluable experience. I would choose an essay question from a past paper and read the appropriate books to answer it. He guided me from there with his insights into the plays or prose I'd chosen. The expectation was that I formed my own opinions first. This enabled me to develop self-confidence and independent learning skills, which made the transition to university smooth and painless. But good teaching goes much further than pedagogy and prowess in particular subjects. The first lecture I attended at Teacher Training College began with the lecturer saying that when he was a secondary school teacher, if he was asked what he taught, he would say kids. That is, he said, is the most important thing. No matter what subject you teach, you are first and foremost a teacher of young people. The teachers at Rendcomb certainly subscribed to that principle, and I felt we were valued and nurtured as individuals, no matter where our strengths lay. This is something I aspired to emulate when I became a teacher myself. The Rendcomb staff had enormous commitment to extracurricular activities. I took full advantage of the opportunity to do music and drama. I still remember the joy of the first choir practice I attended as a first former, and being bowled over by singing in 4-part harmony, and also taking part, again in my first term, in an opera, Der Freischütz, where I played a maiden in the chorus. John Wilson allowed me into the school orchestra, even as a beginner cellist, and I took piano lessons with Roma Foster. Later on, I acted in productions of Comedy of Errors and Oh What a Lovely War. Music and drama were great joys for me at Rendcomb, and it is perhaps hardly surprising that I went on to become a drama teacher, staging many musicals in the secondary schools where I taught. Such extracurricular activities, no doubt, do much to foster positive relationships between teachers and pupils. There was generally a very relaxed atmosphere about the place, and pupils tended to behave not out of fear of reprisals, but more because they didn't want to upset anyone. Mischief making was taken in good humour. I remember one breakfast where Bill White announced with a characteristic raised eyebrow that he would like to see after grace the person who put the sock in the bell. At the end of the autumn term, there'd be a fancy dress party for the whole school. Everyone dressed up, including the staff, and I enjoyed watching and later participating in the sketches in which the teachers were sent up by the pupils. Underpinning staff-pupil relationships, there was a sense that the staff really cared for their charges. I remember being in a panic on the verge of A-levels and Bill White coming to my study to check if I was all right and give me encouragement for the coming weeks. All these attributes of care, commitment and encouragement were things I tried to foster in my own teaching, and the rendcomb staff provided me with some great role models. One of the things that also impresses me about rendcomb in the 70s was the degree to which pupils had responsibilities for the running of the school. I was an active participant in the general meeting and its committees, which gave me an insight into political processes and developed confidence to speak in public. Being a prefect stood me in good stead for being a teacher. I was the resident prefect in charge of the third-year house, supervising prep and doing dorm duty. There can be very few schools now that would invest their pupils with such responsibilities, and I feel lucky to have had that insight into pastoral care. I enjoyed a 31-year career in teaching before deciding to have a change, and in 2016 I moved up to the Yorkshire Dales to set up a residential creative writing centre. The Garsdale Retreat is situated in the Yorkshire Dales National Park, 6 miles from the nearest town. Tutors and course participants alike enjoy being able to walk out from their writing sessions into the open countryside. This kind of thing seemed familiar to me, but it took me a bit of time to realise I'd actually moved back to rendcomb. So I'll end with the poem that Brian mentioned at the beginning, which I wrote to mark this auspicious occasion, and it's called 50 Years On. 50 years on. With daps afoot, we ran the lodge's race, did public work and monthly did our duties, ate snackers, swilbin pie with Latin grace, played games up top, admired the strange beauty of the wilderness where we made our dens, had Christmas parties planned by committee, threw stuff in waggers, not waste paper bins, enjoyed great freedom, much informality. We may have been schooled under different heads, Lee Brown, James, Medill and Anthony Quick, but we share a common language, things said in a younger time, which will always stick. Now, as old boys, we come back to Rome at Rendcomb College, a place we once called home. Thank you very much.